President Trump calls out San Francisco for its troubled streets. One native of the city says that he's shutting down his bar due to rampant drug dealing outside of his door. KPIX5's political reporter Melissa Kane in San Francisco with this longtime business owner who simply has had enough. Right, Melissa?
That's right. We're on 7th Street, just south of Market in San Francisco. Now, behind me is a bar called Mr. Smith's. And about 50 feet in that direction, you can't see it, but trust me, that's the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. And across the street is the office of the U.S. government in San Francisco. Now, despite these prestigious buildings, this is an area that is also rife with drug dealing and, of course, open-air drug using. And now the owner of Mr. Smith's has shut its doors, saying neither employees nor customers want to walk the gauntlet that is now required just to get inside.
It's always hard shutting down a business, and it's frustrating when it's something that I feel the city should be able to control or do something about, and that they're just not.
Max Young says that when he opened Mr. Smith's in the Tenderloin in the early 2000s, the area was pretty deserted.
There was some street level crime, there were some issues, but not to the level that we're seeing today.
He hoped that some new hotels and other businesses in the area would improve the neighborhood.
Instead, it's gotten increasingly worse, and now I'm dealing with organized drug dealers on my corner every day.
In fact, in the few minutes we took to do this interview, several drug deals took place in plain sight.
I don't know the details or where the breakdown in the situation is. I do know the police are working their tails off, and so it's not there.
1, 2, 3. San Francisco Mayor London Breed says the city needs more housing and accountability.
People are not being held accountable for their actions, and that's important to make sure that we have a district attorney's office that are addressing these issues.
The DA's office says that last year there were about 2 arrests for drug dealing each day, and it prosecuted 86% of them. But the dealers have small amounts of drugs on them, which makes courts very hesitant to jail them for very long. But Young says something has to change.
What we're doing now isn't working.
Now, some 89 people died of fentanyl overdoses last year in San Francisco, and Max Young says that if 89 people were shot, for example, the city would bring all its resources and energy to bear to make sure it didn't happen again. And yet, when it comes to drug use and drug dealing, some people here are just too happy to look the other way. Live in San Francisco, Melissa Kane, KPIX5.
President Trump's Bay Area blitz. He's in and out in a flash. Supporters coughing up that cash while protesters give him their own kind of welcome.
Trump's money is dirty money. Trump's money is dirty money.
KPIX 5 News at 5 begins right now with the president's first trip to the Bay Area since taking office, shrouded in secrecy. But it didn't stay that way for long. Good evening. I'm Veronica Dela Cruz.
And I'm Ken Bassita in for Alan tonight. We have team coverage of the president's whirlwind Bay Area visit, where homelessness was a big topic. The HUD Secretary Ben Carson dropped in on San Francisco today to tour a new affordable housing development. Carson is now leading a federal push to intervene in California's homeless crisis. But he says the solutions lie in private-public partnerships, not more federal spending.
Tonight, the nation's top housing official catching some heat for comments he made allegedly about transgender people while visiting San Francisco. According to the Washington Post, HUD Secretary Ben Carson expressed concern about, quote, big, hairy men coming into women's homeless shelters. The Post reports he also said he is unhappy that society no longer seems to know the difference between men and women. Carson visited HUD's San Francisco office this week. People who were there tell the paper that many were shocked. A HUD spokesperson told the Post, quote, the secretary does not use derogatory language to refer to transgendered individuals. Any reporting to the contrary is false.
We brought you the story yesterday of a bar owner in San Francisco who shut his doors for good because drug dealers and users were driving away customers. While our reporter Melissa Kane was doing her live report, a man collapsed behind her and was taken away in an ambulance. Melissa Kane went back to the streets today to follow up on the story for us. Melissa?
We were here yesterday, just on 7th Street, a little south of Market, bringing you the story of how this bar called Mr. Smith's is closing. While we were on camera, on the corner right over there, where it says dead end, a man actually collapsed and had to be taken to the hospital in an ambulance, although one witness told us today that he actually died there on the sidewalk. We talked to locals who have to work here on this stretch of 7th Street every day, and they tell us this is a common occurrence, and it's getting worse. We set up our camera on 7th Street near Market, and it wasn't long before we heard sirens.
I call the sirens in the area. I've been here so long, the 7th Street Serenade.
Richard Perry has had an art studio on this block for 30 years. He says alcoholics used to congregate here, but they weren't violent. That's not the case anymore for these drug users and dealers.
People have been intimidated. Some people have been stabbed. It's worse.
I've been here for several years, and it was always kind of a dodgy neighborhood, but in the last 6 months to a year, it's as if they've sort of taken over this corner, and it really attracts a rough crowd.
With dealers openly selling drugs, some customers just can't wait to use them. That means many people here are high. Some block doorways, some urinate and defecate, some leave their used needles around, and some just pass out.
We have people here now, and pretty soon after they shoot up, they will be incapacitated, and we have to deal with that.
Peter Sellers is the building manager at 26 7th Street. He and his employees used to call 911 about twice a week to report people in distress. Now it's 5 times a week. According to fire department statistics, in 2013, on this block of 7th Street, 26 people were either found dead or transported to a hospital by ambulance. By 2017, it was 64. But in 2018, it jumped to 126. This year, it's on track to have 141, all on this single block. For the people who work here, being surrounded by increasing levels of drug use is stressful and scary and heartbreaking.
One time it was on a Christmas day, finding a gentleman dead in our doorway, and it's tough.
Now, Mr. Sellers told us, as the building manager, he negotiated the lease for CVS Pharmacy to come to this neighborhood. He was hoping that it would actually improve the scene here. He said, but instead, it's become the most shoplifted CVS in America. Live in San Francisco, Melissa Kane, KPIX 5.
Let's start with Len Ramirez live in Portola Valley with more on the president's pricey lunch and those protests. Len?
Well, after violent clashes with protesters in the 2016 campaign, the Trump administration kept the location of this fundraiser very secret until the last couple of hours. It was only after a tip about caterers being in a certain neighborhood and a massive police presence along Alpine Road here that the location was finally given away. President Trump arrived at Moffett Federal Airfield in Mountain View, but he was not greeted by any elected officials on the ground. After shaking hands with the California chair of the Republican National Committee, Harmeet Dillon, Trump gave a couple of fist bumps to onlookers and then got inside his limousine. A few supporters and protesters watched his motorcade pass by the airfield gates.
It's really nice to you, but it's not every day you get an opportunity to be that close to the President of the United States.
I just came out to see one of the worst disasters we've ever had in the presidency.
Chopper 5 spotted the presumed location of the president's fundraiser before the event got started, a mansion in the hills on the border of Palo Alto and Portola Valley, believed to be the home of former tech executive Scott McNeely. The home was recently listed for sale at $96 million. As word of the location leaked out, protesters set up along Alpine Road, complete with a massive baby Trump balloon, which organizers brought up from San Diego. They were all within shouting distance of the motorcade when it came by.
We believe in love. We don't believe in hate. He's a hate monger. He's here to take the money of people who are too foolish to know what he really is.
As Trump met with supporters raising an estimated $15 million for his campaign, police closed down Alpine Road and ramps leading to Interstate 280. Hours later, the motorcade zoomed back out to Moffett Field. As he boarded Air Force One, President Trump waved to someone on the side, but literally didn't look back. His supporters here wish he would visit more often, but after violence and clashes with protesters in 2016, they say they understand why his visits are rare and secretive.
There's a lot of Trump supporters here. You know, a lot of people are just kind of afraid to, say anything. They're afraid that they might lose their job or something.
And so just like that, President Trump was in and out of the Bay Area. He's going next to Southern California. He'll be in Beverly Hills tonight for another fundraiser, and then San Diego tomorrow. Reporting live in Portola Valley, Len Ramirez, KPIX5.
The president has just touched down within the last hour. We know he is here to fundraise for his 2020 re-election campaign.
We have live team coverage of his visit today in the Bay Area. Let's begin with KPIX5's Len Ramirez, who's live at Moffett Airfield, where the president just landed a short time ago. Len?
That's right. Air Force One touching down a little bit after 11 a.m. this morning, pretty much on schedule as we had been told that he would be arriving. There was a very small crowd of people there to greet him, but he was greeted there on the ground by Harmeet Dillon, the Republican National Committee California chair. He did a couple of fist bumps to the audience that was ways away from the airfield, and then he got into his limousine and came through the main entrance here. Now, there were several groups of people on both sides of the street, some supporters, some not supporters here in California. So you can imagine that his visit here is causing a lot of people to look up, take notice, and find out exactly what his plans are, because they would like to protest, but those plans have been very secretive. And that may be because of the last time that he visited California back in 2016. He attended a fundraiser and actually had to come in through a back entrance because of protesters that had blocked a street. He was seen walking through a ditch and getting through a fence to get to his event. And then the San Jose rally that happened later in June, there were several people, Trump supporters, that had been beaten up, bruised, and eggs thrown, things like that. So a lot of questions about exactly where he is and where he will be going, but we'll have more coverage on that as the day goes through. Reporting live from Moffett Federal Airfield in Mountain View, Len Ramirez, KPIX5.
All right, Len, thank you. And now we continue our coverage with Jackie Ward live in Portola Valley, where people are protesting the president's visit. Jackie?
That's right. President Trump and his motorcade were right on schedule. They drove down Alpine Road at 11:40 this morning, where these protesters, at least a couple hundred, were here. A lot of them lined up since 10 this morning. I spoke to someone who came all the way from Grass Valley. Here's the moment when President Trump and his staff drove by. It happened pretty quickly, actually, as they sped down Alpine Road and actually caught some of the protesters off guard. Protesters told us that they hoped Trump saw both the chicken balloon and the baby Trump balloon on display today, as they called out the president for not disclosing details of his trip here. The California Republican Committee defended the president for not revealing his planned location, saying he is not made very welcome here by law enforcement or city leaders. The last time President Trump was here in 2016 was when he was a candidate. We believe President Trump is holding a re-election campaign just down the street from here. Protesters told us why they are here today.
It's to show him that he's not welcome in California. It's to show him that we are a diverse state. We believe in love. We don't believe in hate. He's a hate monger. He's here to take the money of people who are too foolish to know what he really is.
Tickets for today's event cost anywhere between $1,000 per person up to $100,000 per couple. The latter option included a chance to dine with President Trump and take a photo with him, according to the event invitation. The California Republican Committee says people attending the president's event today knew where and when to meet prior to the event, but then they got on shuttles to be taken to an undisclosed location. So right now, we believe that President Trump is at that fundraising event, again, just down the street from where we are now. That means these protesters will wait and stay out here until the motorcade comes back down Alpine Road. After he leaves the Bay Area today, President Trump is reportedly going to a fundraising event in Beverly Hills tonight, and then tomorrow he'll go to San Diego. Live from Portola Valley, Jackie Ward, KPIX5.
Jackie, thank you. And Chopper 5 flew over the location where protesters say that President Trump's fundraiser will be held in Portola Valley. The president is expected to quietly raise some cash here in Silicon Valley. Right now, a large white tent has been set up in the backyard of this home. Chopper 5 spotted extra security, including uniformed officers on the ground.
Also in the Bay Area today, Housing and Urban Development Secretary Ben Carson. He's expected to focus on the homelessness crisis. In Santa Clara County, people impacted by homelessness say they welcome any genuine help from the feds. But a pastor working on the issue says federal intervention won't be good.
Trump's talking about let's just get the homeless off the streets. It's disgusting. The language he uses is inflammatory, and it doesn't sound like a real strategy to house people.
Some people living in homeless camps tell KPIX they don't want to be forced into federally run shelters or camps. And we'll have much more on the president's Bay Area visit coming up on the KPIX 5 News at 5 o'clock and online at kpix.com.
KPIX 5 political insider Phil Mateer joins us now. And Phil, with the president and Ben Carson both in town, they're addressing one of the Bay Area's biggest problems. Where were the city leaders today?
About as far away as they could get. I mean, they were nowhere near Secretary Carson or President Trump's appearance today, although the mayor in San Francisco did lend a hand behind the scenes. It was over the weekend that Mayor Breed first heard that Housing Secretary Ben Carson was planning on making a cameo appearance at San Francisco Public Housing Project. The mayor didn't get official confirmation, however, about the visit until yesterday. And while the mayor's office assisted in setting up the secretary's meeting with local housing tenants at Bridge Housing, Carson never extended an invitation, actually, for the Mayor Breed to join him. So Mayor Breed did invite Carson to stop by City Hall for a chat, but he never replied. But he did stop and speak with reporters about the housing crisis.
Well, there's no question that the local policies drive these kinds of issues. In San Francisco, a single individual can protest and stop an affordable housing development. That's a big one. One of the big problems, and nobody wants to talk about it, is NIMBYism.
Now, the president made his news of his own when he took on the state's homeless epidemic as well, telling reporters on Air Force One that, quote, we can't let Los Angeles and San Francisco and numerous other cities destroy themselves by allowing what's happening, and that the people of San Francisco are fed up and the people of Los Angeles are fed up, and we're looking at it and we'll be doing something about it. What it is he'll be doing remains to be seen. But the president's statements on homeless and the housing crisis put state and local officials in a bit of a political bind. For while they disagree with the tone of the president's remarks, they do agree that they could use more federal assistance, and that one of the biggest obstacles to building more housing in San Francisco and, in fact, the entire Bay Area are local regulations and the politics that say that while we may agree with the need for new housing, once you bring in a project, you say it's too big, it doesn't belong here, it stops, and so we wind up not building it.
This whole visit is kind of a sign of the times. I mean, we live in the most populous state. There's more money generated in California than any other state in the country. And the president can't come here and sit down with local leaders and have some kind of a forum, actually discuss the issue. He's got to jump in, grab money, leave. There's no cohesiveness
the same thing
going
with Ben
on.
Carson. He left immediately.
It's really strange.
Low cohesion, even lower cooperation in many areas. But politics as usual, as you said. Yeah. The locals don't want to necessarily talk to him, and he scoops up the money and leaves. That's politics.
Strange times we're in right now.
All right.
Thank you,
Chair, we appreciate it. Thanks. Breaking news aboard Air Force One. President Trump escalating his feud with the city of San Francisco over its homeless crisis. Now he's threatening to issue an environmental violation. But tonight, city leaders are firing back. Good evening. I'm Veronica Dela Cruz.
And I'm Ken Bastida. Night Beach Joe Vasquez is in San Francisco with President Trump's unusual threat against the city. Joe?
Yeah, Ken, the president said he's going to sic the Environmental Protection Agency against San Francisco, a concept one supervisor described as nonsense. The president wrapped up his California tour today, taking a shot at San Francisco.
If you look at San Francisco, it's a total disaster what's happening, where they're going to ruin those cities. And we're going to get involved very soon on a federal basis if they don't clean up their act.
Then tonight, as he was leaving, he made some more remarks on Air Force One regarding San Francisco's homeless crisis. According to the Pool Reporter, the president claimed, quote, pollution was flowing into the ocean because of waste in storm sewers, citing specifically used needles. The quote from the president, we're going to be giving San Francisco, they're in total violation, we're going to be giving them a notice very soon. EPA is going to be putting out a notice. They're in serious violation.
Sounds completely ridiculous to me. I don't know why we believe a word that comes out of his mouth at this point.
San Francisco Supervisor Matt Haney says the president is taking a political shot at the city to whip up his base of supporters. As for the city's water system, according to the San Francisco Public Utility Commission website, most of the grates you see on street corners are actually catch basins. What's collected there goes to a treatment plant, not the ocean. The only places where some storm drains do go directly to the ocean with minimal treatment are on the outskirts of the city, such as Ocean Beach, Lake Merced, and Mission Bay.
There's no EPA violations. This is somebody who doesn't even believe in environmental protection. And so this just sounds like nonsense. It's unfortunate that the President of the United States is coming to San Francisco, choosing to attack our city with lies rather than actually trying to assist us with more funding for affordable housing.
About an hour ago, Mayor London Breed, the San Francisco mayor, issued her own statement. Quote, in San Francisco, we are focused on advancing solutions to meet the challenges on our streets, not throwing off ridiculous assertions as we board an airplane to leave the state. If the president wants to talk about homelessness, we are committed to working with our state and federal partners on actual solutions. Reporting live on the Night Beat, I'm Joe Vasquez.
KPIX5's Ann Makovic is in Oakland, where a roundtable discussion just wrapped up to legalize pot on a federal level.
The plan to legalize marijuana has been a focus of O'Rourke's entire political career, and he's framing the matter as an issue of racial injustice.
We know that Americans across race and different backgrounds and ethnicities use marijuana and have used illegal drugs at roughly the same rate, but only some Americans are more likely than other Americans to be arrested for it, to serve time for it.
O'Rourke met with pot business leaders at Blunt's and More dispensary. The owner was arrested for selling marijuana a decade ago and later won a cannabis business license under Oakland's equity program.
This is important for people of his stature to come and talk, to hear from us what's going on.
O'Rourke's plan would expunge pot possession records and help businesses use banks and impose a new tax, part going to support reentry to society for those imprisoned for pot possession.
The criminal code in this country has forever, as long as we've been a country, been used to keep some people down by law.
Last night, O'Rourke visited San Quentin State Prison and spoke about his 2 prior arrests, one for drunk driving, another a misdemeanor burglary charge, which was dropped. And those events, he says, didn't define him in part because of his race. This is O'Rourke's 4th trip to California as a presidential candidate. Next, he's heading to Denver. In Oakland, Ann Makovic, KPIX5.
Hey guys, what's up?
Watch out. Oh, look at that.
Oh.
This is one of the richest cities in the world, but we have neighborhoods that are compared to some of the dirtiest.
The tourists were often shocked and appalled and in disbelief at what they were seeing. The people who live in this neighborhood have come to accept it as a fact of life.
What's up, guys? I'm Abby Fernandez, and I'm here with 2 of our finest journalists at NBC Bay Area, if I do say so myself. I'm here with...
I'm liking the enthusiasm. Begad Chavan.
I'm Jonathan Bloom.
And so I brought them both here to downtown SF because you've both covered a topic that is very prominent here to the community, a topic that is so important, a topic that we're standing on.
I think this is something that a lot of people who live and work or even visit San Francisco talk about. And it was something that we thought, let's sort of quantify how bad is this problem, really?
I've talked to some people that have said, you know, over the last couple of years, it's just gotten so much worse. And you've sort of taken the approach, Jonathan, about like tech, right? Everything about technology. You talked about Snap Crab and about these tools that they're now putting underneath trash cans. So what was it like for you sort of taking that approach and that angle?
Well, first of all, when I went out to start reporting on this story, one of the things I found is that people are appalled that this is supposedly the center of the tech universe, and yet we can't come up with solutions using tech that will solve the problems that exist on these streets.
Well, parts of the city aren't just disgusting, these diseased streets can be dangerous.
So how dirty is the city? I hit the streets with my producer to find out.
So take me through how you guys were like walking. I mean, this was 3 days worth, right? How long did you walk for each of those days?
I mean, it's pretty much the whole day. So I'd be on one side of the sidewalk here, and then my producer Robert would be on the other side over there.
Okay.
And we'd each have a clipboard, a sort of checklist where we'd actually just walk just like this, and we'd see if there was any trash here, and we'd take photos, we'd take video, and then we'd also count how many piles of feces we'd find.
Oh, you smell that?
Even I feel like my eyes darting right now, and I feel like, yeah, I feel like I can never walk the streets of San Francisco the same.
I don't want to finish your bottle, but can I have some? Are you cleaning it with that?
Yeah.
Thank you. Oh, that's a lot. So when you did the snap crab story, did you walk the streets of SF2?
We did. We walked very much around that block that was reported by the national media as being the dirtiest block in the city, which, by the way,
is Hyde Street, which is down.
Which is Hyde Street. What I found was that this is somebody, it's a young man who moved to the city and took up residence right here at 6th and Market and was appalled at what he saw. That every day he would walk out of his apartment and nearly step on feces or needles. And so he said, well, I'm a software developer. I'm good with data. I should do something about this. And he built this app that essentially makes it easy for people to report their findings.
How do you feel as an investigative reporter just going around and knowing that this city, is full of trash?
Well, I think it's this crazy juxtaposition. I mean, there are obviously parts of San Francisco that are pristine and beautiful and amazing and tend to look like that pretty frequently. But then you have other parts that have literally been compared to slums. We talked to an infectious disease expert. He is a guy who literally wrote the book about some of the dirtiest slums in the world. And ultimately, when we showed him what we found, he was pretty direct. He said it essentially rivals some of the dirtiest slums in the world, which I think when you think about that is just crazy, right?
Why 153 blocks, first of all? How did you determine those were the blocks that you were going to do?
Well, we were looking at sort of doing a big enough swath of the city that it would be representative of the problem, if there actually is one. And we also wanted to choose an area that was close to a lot of different things. Schools, police stations, major hotels, right next to Union Square. San Francisco is a fairly small area. You're just talking about 7 miles by 7 miles. And so it's pretty difficult to go through life without crossing the same sections of town. Whereas in LA, for example, Skid Row has blocks and blocks and blocks of tents, but you could live your entire life in Los Angeles and never actually go through that neighborhood. Here in San Francisco, you're crossing every neighborhood pretty frequently. And when you look at sort of the dollars and cents of it, we actually pick up 20 times less trash than LA, but we actually spend 20 million more dollars doing it. So I think ultimately people sort of scratch their heads and ask why. And
or how does that connect?
How does that make sense? And I think that's why people just remain frustrated at this point.
You raise a good problem about the visibility of it. This is actually something that Governor Newsom talked about back when he was mayor. He said that San Francisco is unique among big cities in that all of the services and supportive housing for homeless people and people suffering from mental illness are right in the center of the city where everybody can see them. That in New York, you might send those people to get services in the Bronx. But in San Francisco, you send them to a neighborhood that is directly adjacent to downtown and some of the most heavily trafficked tourist areas of the city in order to receive help.
And in fact, some of the most common complaints that the Tourism Bureau gets in San Francisco is just how dirty this city is. And in fact, it's often something they note in explaining that they don't intend to come back here.
People are just putting trash on it and around it.
This is recycling though.
Well, this is somebody's trash can from their home or their business, and people have just decided, well, there's a trash can here, and I can't get the lid open, so I'm just going to put my trash on the ground next to it, and that's become a big problem.
So we've walked about maybe 3 blocks. It's been quite a few, and I feel like you're a lot more conscious. So for you, Jonathan, these sensors, they were only placed in a particular location or around a certain location here in downtown, right?
Yeah, when they put those sensors in, the 1,000 of them, they're doing mostly the neighborhoods that have a lot of tourists in them, frankly, because they are trying to clean up the streets for the visitors. You almost wouldn't know that this is anything more than a regular trash can, but if you look right up in here, you see that little black plastic thing? That is a NordSense sensor. And in that little tiny box, there is basically a cell phone, a camera, some ultrasonic sensing equipment, and a battery that is so huge it'll last for like several years. When it's 70% full, it sends an automated message to 311 saying, hey, you probably ought to get somebody out there. Just for background, after our investigative unit did their reporting, a lot of national media came in.
What big change, what drastic change have we seen, after this went viral?
I mean, I definitely think it's an issue that the city is focused on. After we first started reporting on this, San Francisco has since started a team of people who actually go out and pick up used syringes across town. That's something that's new.
Just the syringes.
Exactly. They're purely focused on needle pickup. You also have a totally separate team that's focused on cleaning up human feces.
So we've talked about the surface issue here. I mean, after your experience reporting on this, what do you think is the real issue here?
The real issue is that there's not one issue. There are a lot of complicated problems that have sort of combined together, especially in this part of the city, to make for a really multifaceted, really filthy problem.
What do you think? What do you think after you've covered this? What do you feel you've noticed is the real issue here?
I think Jonathan's absolutely right. I don't think there is just one quick fix because it's not just one problem. It is an indication of a lot of things. I think a lack of housing, a lack of public restrooms for people. I think, and it's also indicative of a substance abuse crisis and a mental health crisis too. I mean, obviously someone in their right mind who has a bathroom to go to obviously would then not choose to go to the bathroom here. I mean, we're living in a city right now that averages about 70 complaints per day about human feces.
Yeah, that's insane.
That's per day. I mean,
we saw some coming up here in a span of like what? How many steps did we take? And we saw a few of them. Yeah. And you don't notice this until you really notice this. Mind you, streets are not clean, but maybe they're not as dirty as these guys.
We haven't even started the story, and I already got... Oh, that's gross. Oh, that's gross.
I've seen the data. The data says there's no clean place to sit.
I'm just gonna sit here.
Yeah, I mean...
Looks like somebody had some ice cream. Some of it.
No, you did not want to sit there.